mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on the way. Yeah. You know I be on the way.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Fight Against Mediocrity podcast. I'm extremely excited for our guest today, Nick Hutchison. You may recognize him. He spoke at the Create Your Own Economy conference. I've been on his podcast. He's been on my podcast in the past. He's part of the family. And because you guys already know a little bit about him, the things that I'd like to share about Nick is, number one, whenever I talk to anybody who attended the first Create Your Own Economy conference, they always say, man, Nick was so good on stage. He crushed his talk. He was so well poised. So I always like to compliment Nick on that. And then also, I just think Nick is an all-around awesome person. He makes you feel cared for. He's a really good listener, and he is really good at what he does. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Kevin. I have to have you introduce me next time I speak at an event because those are some great compliments.
Let's do it. Okay. I remember, and I guess one other thing that I'd like to say. So the very first time we met was because you DM'd me on Instagram. I had just finished my book, Talk is Cheap, The Fight Against Mediocrity. And you, Book Thinkers promotes books. And so you're like, hey, I can promote your book, help you there. And one of the reasons I did business with you, obviously, one is because you're good at what you do and I wanted to promote my book. But two, I just wanted a relationship with you. I thought you're really, you're going places. And I was like, yeah, I got to hitch my wagon to whatever Nick's doing. And so I wanted to, number one, just say cold DMs are alive and well. So any business owners out there, keep doing it and crushing it. But when we were first met, I remember we talked about with books, one of the problems is that you read a lot of books, but then you forget it. You don't implement it. Your notes stay in the book or your notes stay in the notebook or on the computer. And yeah, sure, it was good. I'm sure the exposure was helpful, but the problem with just reading and not implementing and not applying. And I remember we talked about that. What was that? Almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is Nick just finished or releasing his book called The Rise of the Reader. The tagline or the subtitle, Strategies for Mastering Your Reading Habits and Applying What You Learn. And I want to ask all about it, and I'm super excited to dive into your book. But as I was reading the description on Amazon, something that stood out to me was you said the power of intention. Well, you said a bunch of cool stuff, but the power of intention when it comes to choosing the right books for you and how much you retain from their knowledge. And you said how to avoid biases. You said methods for note-taking and information implementation, and a bunch of other really cool things. Because you've read over 400 books, so I'm gonna stop rambling. Tell us about your new book and how that idea came about. Of, man, people are reading all these books, but they're not really applying them.
Well, listen, Kevin, growing my community over the years, I've had hundreds of people, and I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of people say to me, Nick, I appreciate all of the book recommendations. In fact, I think a lot of these books could probably help solve some problems in my life. But each and every time I read a book, I get all excited, but I fail to take action. I see that you're taking action. You're going after it, man. Your dreams are coming true. So what's the difference? Like, what are you doing to take action? And I would respond to people. I'm a nice guy. I'd send people a voice note, maybe type something out, jump on a quick Zoom call, but I'd leave every single one of those conversations feeling like I underdelivered. And that stinks, especially when you care about positively impacting people. I felt like that because I knew there was more that I could offer. There was more that I was doing. And so I had a choice. Like, do I deliver a course? Do I create a new podcast? Or do I write a book? And I knew that my audience wanted me to write a book. That's what they love to consume. I stumbled across a quote recently by Napoleon Hill. It's one of my favorite quotes now of all time. It says, action is the real measure of intelligence. What's the difference between reading a good book and having it change your life or not? It's action. So I started the journey of observing my own behavior from a third-party perspective. Like, what was I doing that I wasn't aware that I was doing? because I didn't have it all mapped out. I couldn't articulate it to people. I just knew that I was doing something. And so that's why I decided to write the book. I truly believe that these books can solve almost any problem in our lives or in our business. It's just, how do you take action? I wanted to go figure that out, and I was doing it, and now it's all in that book. So that's kind of why I decided to write the book. And, the subject of effective implementation frameworks or effective note taking, like all that's in there, and we can cover whatever you want to cover today. But I really hope that this book helps you get more out of every other book that you're reading. I believe there's an opportunity cost to picking up something like $100 million leads and just reading the book without all the strategies that I have to offer. You'll get more out of it if you implement what I have to teach.
Basically, what I just heard is before anyone reads another book, we need to read yours.
Yes. And I can confidently say you'll find at least one thing that can improve your ability to implement the other books that you read.
100%. I could say with certainty that this book is written for me because I'm guilty. I went on a trip to Africa 2 weeks ago. One of the, pros and cons was there was a 16-hour flight from Atlanta to Johannesburg. 16 hours is a long time. I'm not a big movie watcher on planes, so I read books, and I actually was able to finish 5 books while I was in Africa. And I was thinking about it, and dude, this is gonna be so embarrassing to say on camera, but someone asked me how Africa was. I was like, oh, it was cool. And I actually got to read 5 books while I was there, and like, oh, cool, what books? And I was like, what books did I read? And I could only name like 3 of the 5. And if I can't even remember like the title of the book, how am I going to remember anything in the book? That's crazy. So I think a lot of the listeners are guilty of this. Hopefully not just me. You can use that in your marketing. Some guy read 5 books and couldn't even remember the book, let alone what was in it. What are the biggest mistakes people make when reading books that inhibits them from retaining and applying the information?
Kevin, I will use that example in future talks. In fact, when I was at your first event, I opened my speech by saying, raise your hand if you've read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Ton of hands went up.
Mm-hmm.
I said, keep your hand up if you can name all 7 habits. From what I remember, only one person had their hand up. And the follow-up to that is, what is the point of reading or learning any information if you can't even retain the simplest form of it, like the book title? So here's the biggest mistake that I see. When I meet people at a conference or something, I'll say, what are you reading? Normally they'll know the book title, and I'll say, why? And they'll be like, what do you mean, why? Why are you reading the book that you're reading? What is your intention for the book? And they'll say, well, I don't know. I don't have one. Like, I just read it because I saw it on Instagram, or Kevin recommended it to me, whatever the case is. So here's step number 1. We need to build a SMART goal, an intention for each book that we read. And we need to write it on the inside cover of the book. So here's what that looks like. SMART, as a lot of us know, stands for specific, measurable, attainable, actionable, relevant to your life or written down, and time bound. So I just got this copy of $100 million leads in. I have not written the intention on the inside cover yet. So when I look at this book and I go, how to get strangers to want to buy your stuff, you can get 2x, 10x, or 100x more leads than you currently are without doing much more. Okay, it's a book on leads. What's my intention? Find and implement at least 2 lead generation strategies by the end of next week. Because I want my business to grow and I know it's positively impacting people. If I read that intention, find and implement at least 2 lead generation strategies for my business by the end of next week, each and every time I open up the book, I'm only going to highlight what's related to my intention. I'm only going to highlight those 2 implementation strategies. Now, maybe I'll find like 10 or 15 things that I can implement from this book. When I'm done, I'll list them all out and I'll say, what 20% of these takeaways, these potential actions, can lead to most of the change, 80% of the change? What are the highest leveraged activities that I can take action on within the next week or 2 weeks so that this book positively impacts my life? And I think, the most common mistake is reading without intention, just blindly reading a book or blindly attending a conference, not really knowing what you're looking for and hoping that inspiration is going to strike from the heavens and change your life. I bet on the person who knows exactly why they're there at that event, or exactly why they're reading the book, and exactly what they're looking for. That person wins. They're prepared because they wrote their intention. So I'm excited to read this book and implement some strategies from it. And I think, to kind of wrap up like this long tangent about intention, what's the difference between somebody that reads this book and somebody that reads this book and it changes their life? It's taking action related to their intention for the book. That's the difference. So that's step number one. We have to set intention.
Okay. I love it. And I agree 100% with that. I begin every conference with, and every program that I start with, this can be what changes your life if you decide that it's going to change your life. Like if you decide, yeah, this is going to change my life, I'm going to take action on it, like I'm going to be all here. And so it definitely starts with that intention. You talked about setting the intention. Now I'm curious about note-taking. As you're reading the book, you talked about you end it with X amount of points or takeaways or things that you can take action on, and then you pick the top ones. How are you taking notes as you're reading books?
So I like to think of reading and note-taking as two separate activities. If you try to do both at the same time, that's multitasking. It's an inefficient use of your capabilities. We all know multitasking is not the best version of ourselves. So when I'm reading, I have my intention in mind. My brain is filtering for information that can help me achieve my goal for the book. But I don't want to stop reading every time I find something. I'll just annotate it, make a little note. I'll circle a page number, I'll highlight something, and I'll continue to read. I don't want to lose that momentum. I don't want to waste my time. And then at the end of each reading session, so 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever the case is, an entire book, I'll go back through and I'll look and I'll kind of analyze everything that I bracketed off and that I circled. And I say, is this related to my intention? Do I want to rewrite this information? And then I'll rewrite everything. And like I said, that's a separate activity, because as I'm rewriting that information, rewriting is a form of repetition. Repetition leads to retention. So simply by repeating the information, going back and rereading it, thinking about it, rewriting it, I'm more likely to retain and take action. Now, when I have that list of, let's say, 30 potential actions to take from $100 million leads, I will go through and I'll say, what can I take action on right now? What's the most realistic? What's the least overwhelming? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You've got to take bite number one. And so I'll look at that and I'll say, out of the things that I can take action on right now, what has the highest leverage? And then I'll move that into an activity tracker and start to measure activity against it. But I think that's the important thing about note-taking, is that it is a separate activity. It's not the same as reading, and that repetition will lead to retention. Final thing that I'll mention is that the more organized you can be, the better. And so I like to take those favorite takeaways from each book and put them into an online Evernote notebook, tag them so that they're searchable by subject or by problem. And I can always go back and review that information over time. Sometimes it's tough to reread an entire book, but if you can reread your top 10 bullet points or your top 5 bullet points, you're more likely to go refresh yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I think what you said is very underrated. You take what you learned and then you track it to see, did I actually do what I said I was going to do, instead of doing it once and then never doing it again. We started this, but we never really finished the question. How does someone know what book they should read next? Because you and I both know that I'm a book junkie, and if anyone recommends a book and it looks remotely good, I just ordered it. And so I have no lack of books to read, but in your, research, how do I know which book to read next?
I love to read books that solve pain that I'm experiencing in the present moment. Pain in my relationship, pain in my business, pain in my health, pain in, the distance between where I am and where I want to be, or books that can help improve a skill set that's holding me back, something that I consistently fumble on, which is kind of similar to pain. And I think the more relevant it is to your present moment, the more likely you are to take action on that book, because you're emotionally tied to it delivering some type of action that can change your reality, essentially. So that's how I'm always reading. Like when I think about $100 million leads, and I'm just using this book as an example because it's next to me and it's new, lead generation.
Are you sure Alex Hormozy isn't paying you to say all that stuff?
I wish he was. I know you sent me a picture once of him using my face in a presentation, and like, he's not paying me for that. So I'm not paying. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I think that like with this book, I want book thinkers to grow. One of the ways that it's being held back is a lack of lead generation. We're not leveraging paid advertising anywhere. And our lead generation mechanisms are essentially cold outreach still today. There's some other stuff, but that's mostly it. And so I'm reading this book because I'm the bottleneck. The business is being held back by a lack of leads. And that's a pain that I experience on a daily basis, right? Like I'm looking at our revenue numbers every single day. Like it's a totally relevant issue in my life. And so by implementing this book, it will solve problems that I face on a daily basis. And I mean, imagine being able to walk out of this book experience and go, well, leads are no longer my issue. It's fulfillment that's the issue. That'd be an amazing problem to have. So that's what I try to do. If you're facing an issue in your life, there's probably a good book that can help you solve it. The reality is that billions of people have lived before us. Millions of them have documented their life experience in the form of books. Thousands of those books can probably help you solve the problem that you're experiencing on a daily basis. And so for $20 and a few hours of your time, you can remove the pain that you're experiencing. Who doesn't want that?
No.
So I think that's how I think about, the next book that I'm reading. It's all about pain or skills. Another thing to think about, for somebody that's brand new to the space, pick a book about somebody that you really admire. Today, as we're recording this, Kevin, Elon Musk just came out by Walter Isaacson. Walter Isaacson is a famous biographer. He wrote the book on Steve Jobs, Benjamin Franklin, Leonardo da Vinci, so many other iconic people. And he's done sort of a checkup on Elon up until modern day. So if you want to be like Elon, if you want to learn from Elon, if you just find him fascinating from a distance, read that book. You're bound to learn something and you'll stay invested in the story because Elon is a subject of conversation for anybody who's tied to business in any way, shape, or form, at least on a monthly basis. You'll be a little bit more educated and you'll feel good when you can drop a fact or something that somebody else didn't know about him. So that's another great place to start. Read about pain or read about things that you're really, really, really interested in.
Yeah. No, and I totally agree with you. One of the most underrated type of book to read is a biography or autobiography, because you start to realize that your struggles aren't new, that everyone who's done anything very successful has gone through struggle and trial and been beat up, kicked. It's not new. And so for me, at least, it gives me like, oh yeah, they went through this, I'm going through this, like I'm gonna get there. So you, in your description on Amazon, you say, he's talking about you. He says, now he's giving you over 100 habits to implement into your own reading journey and fulfill your dreams. Tell me about the top, I don't know, 1 to 10, however many you can fit in here. Tell me about some of the top habits that the listeners can take into their next book.
I'll give you a couple of fun examples. What I decided to do with the first half of the book was teach people how to retain and implement more information from the books they're reading. What I decided to do with the second half of my book is share over 100 of the things that I've implemented from the other books I've read and talk about my experience implementing them. And they're broken up into 3 buckets: health-related habits, wealth-related habits, and happiness-related habits. And so I'll share a couple from each bucket. As far as health is concerned, I do so many things related to health. As far as health is concerned, one of my favorite things that I've implemented recently is getting sunlight before I consume caffeine. Most people in the United States drink some form of caffeine on a daily basis. And if you drink caffeine before you've consumed sunlight directly into your eyes, then you will hit that kind of like groggy crash some point in your afternoon. And that's we could get into the technicalities there, but the result of getting outside first thing in the morning and walking my dog within 10 minutes of waking up has been that I can consume caffeine throughout my morning and experience no crash in the afternoon. So I'm a better version of myself with more energy simply by changing the order of my morning routine. That's an example of something that I learned in a book that I read, I implemented, and the result has been amazing. Another example tied to caffeine, just because a lot of people listening can relate, is that caffeine has a half-life of 6 to 8 hours, depending on metabolism and age. So if you consume caffeine 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 p.m., half of that caffeine is still flowing through your system while you're sleeping, which means that your sleep quality is going to be hurt. And the version of you that wakes up the next morning is not as well rested as he or she could have been if they decided to kick the afternoon caffeine. Again, something that I read in a book that I implemented that has improved my health and therefore my energy. So I have 35 health-related tips that I've implemented from the books that I've read. They cover all sorts of things related to physical exercise, related to the order of your morning routine, the food that you're consuming, supplementation. I take a handful of pills every day because my future self, thinking a lot about him. So that's related to health. Related to wealth, there are so many different tips that I've learned. Personal finance and investing are two of my all-time favorite subjects. So I've read like dozens and dozens and dozens, maybe 100 books on the subject. And I'll give you an example. I love the book Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, especially if you're a business owner, but you can apply this to your personal life too. And it takes into account and leverages Parkinson's law. So Parkinson's law states that essentially, if you're given a task, you'll use the entire amount of time given to complete the task. If you're given money, whether it's a weekly paycheck or whatever the case is, you'll use that entire amount of money. That's just naturally how it works. It's why when we make more and we don't think we're changing our standard of living, the money disappears because it will naturally get used up. So the book Profit First teaches us to automate a distribution. The second that it hits your bank account, it gets sent off to a separate bank account. You never saw it, you never had it, so you can't spend it. And what I like to do, not only is that like 10% automated and sent off both in my business and personal life, but I delete those apps from my phone. I can't even check those separate bank accounts because that money is piling up and I don't want to have access to it. So that's just like an automation form of a wealth tip, something that you can implement that's very easy to do and will put more money in your bank account, remove a little bit of that financial scarcity, and free up a little bit more of your time and headspace. And as far as happiness, I can give a couple of tips there. One of my favorite things that I do, which is a little bit unique, is I record a gratitude time capsule every single week on Sundays. So on Sundays, I pull out my phone, selfie mode, and I just talk into the camera for 1 minute. And I highlight the things that I was most grateful for throughout the week. And so at the end of the year, I have 52 videos. They're 1 minute each. So I can watch an entire year's worth of gratitude 20 years from now in less than 1 hour. And from time to time, if I'm ever for a half second feeling off, I'll click into my Google Drive. I'll filter to a random year because I've been doing this for years now. Click into a random video and I'll watch how happy and grateful I was for something that probably turned out to be totally meaningless in the long run, but to see how much joy it brought me a couple of years ago. So that's a tip for bringing gratitude more into your life and being more focused on it. And I'll throw one more out there. Auditing your news feed on social media. So much of social media is negative and divisive, and there's no place for that in my life. So I've unfollowed friends and family members that put negative or divisive content out there. I'll talk to you in real life, but I don't want to consume your content. I want my content to be filled with positive, constructive, useful information. And so if you want to be happier, you want to be around happier people, make sure your news feed, which most of us are spending an hour or two a day in, is filled with happy, positive, constructive information too. So those are just, across, I guess that was 5 tips to improve your health, wealth, and happiness. But those are some of my favorites, I think, from the 100+ that are in there.
Yeah. Amen. And especially to that last one, I did that, got what I 2,000 people down to like 200 or 300 at one point. And yeah, a lot of less noises, less confusion in your life. You just shared habits that you read, implemented, and changed your life. So I want to dive into from when you read them to when you implemented them. What do you do in between that time period to make sure they get implemented?
I have tons and tons of tips in the book there for that. One of the ones that I'll mention today, build an
Dude,
accountability
we
group.
want the inside secrets. We want to know the book before the book comes out.
Well, this is one of the most important ones that everybody can start taking action on today. So build an accountability group that meets on a weekly basis with your most motivated friends, or join Kevin's mastermind because it's kind of the same thing. So, we are, as Jim Rohn says, the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So start having more productive, constructive, positive conversations with the people that you spend the most time with. Build an accountability group that meets on a weekly basis, that talks about taking action, and create this relationship with your friends where they hold you accountable to the things that you say you're going to do. So if I'm reading this book and I say, hey, Kevin, I found this really cool thing and I'm going to try implementing it this week, and I show up to the call next week and I haven't taken any action and you call me out on that, I've underserved myself, but I've also underserved you because I made a commitment to my group that I was going to take action on it. So maybe Thursday night, we're meeting on Friday morning. It'll force me to take action that otherwise I wouldn't have if I didn't have that accountability. So in my book, I detail how to build an accountability group, how to find the right people, how to ask the right questions, how to structure your meetings, how every quarter and then once a year, you should take a step back and look at your life from a macro perspective instead of working within your week. And man, accountability groups, having other people hold me accountable, has changed everything for me. I'll throw one more metaphor out there for people, which is that, if you say, hey, I want to start going to the gym at 7 and your alarm goes off, I guess get Kevin's course on how to wake up earlier. But if that doesn't work for you, get an accountability partner that's going to show up at the gym. Because if they're sitting there waiting, texting you, hey, are you showing up today? Like, come on, you're disappointing me. You have that much more motivation to get out of bed. So when I read things in the books that I'm reading and I put them into my activity tracker, which is a whole separate tip detailed in the book, but we could talk about it if you want. And then I tell my accountability group about it. I mean, it's going to happen. Stating my intention to the universe, to my friends, and to myself. So that's where the magic happens for me. And if you're listening today and you're like, hey, I don't have anybody around me like that, I'd encourage you to dig a little bit deeper. Maybe you have a friend that said they were going to run a marathon 2 years ago. Check in with them. Hey, did you ever run that marathon? If not, can I hold you accountable to starting it this year? And maybe you can hold me accountable to implementing some stuff from the book I'm reading. Or, hey, I gave you that copy of Kevin's book. Did you ever have a chance to read it? No. Maybe you could start reading it with me and we could review it together. And you'll be surprised that people are just looking for an invitation to engage in a positive way with you. Maybe they don't have the language to build an accountability group by themselves, but offer to do most of the work up front, and you'll be amazed at what happens when a friend group rises together. And if that doesn't work, then get in Kevin's comment section on Instagram and look for other really motivated people and reach out to them and say, hey, I'm thinking about reading Kevin's book. Would you be interested in reading it with me? And you send enough DMs to enough people and somebody's going to say yes. And you'll probably have an accountability partner for life. So that's one of my favorite tips.
Yeah. Amen. And go to a conference, go to one of Nick's events, go to one of mine events. Like, I think that's one of the fastest ways to change the trajectory of your life is going to an event as well.
Yeah.
We have a lot of business owners that listen to the podcast. And one of the things that I think be cool to talk about, if you're okay with talking about it, is you are an expert in helping people grow. I mean, I don't know how to put it into words what you do, but launch, scale, and grow their book audience. You help authors grow their audience, sell more of their books. And so I'm curious, with all that you know about launching books, selling books, promoting authors, what's your book launch strategy that you're using?
Sure. So my book launches on November 1st, and here are a few of the things that I'm doing. I'm testing our services. So we do podcast booking for authors where we'll place them on small to medium-sized shows in their niche. So they're talking directly to their ideal audience, and they could talk about their book, and we kind of coach them on how to bring up the book in conversation. And so I have right now over 140 podcasts going live within the week of my launch, just like conversations like this. And everybody's committed to putting out the episode, give or take, within a week of my launch. So that's 140 different podcasts going live that all backlink from an SEO perspective on probably 5 or 6 different platforms to my website, to my book page. And that, it's also random people all over the US and probably a little bit internationally buying the book because they're listening to the podcast and they're getting excited about it and they want to buy a copy. So that's hundreds or thousands of individual book buyers all over the place purchasing within the same week as well. It's like focused attention. It's like a microscope kind of turning the sun's rays into a little bit of fire, right? Light it on fire. So I think the podcast strategy is a really big one. And then each time you meet with a podcaster, like I am right now, although I texted you in advance of this, you could say, hey, it would mean the world to me if you would pre-order a copy of my book. I'm trying to make a positive impact out there, and each and every pre-order counts. So now at a minimum, you're having all of the hosts and some people in their audience all buying the book. You're getting 100 episodes from an SEO perspective, and you're going to take over the world like that. Number 2, we do short form video content for authors. So most of our revenue actually comes from flying out with professional cameras, professional lighting, and filming 50 to 100 videos, turning a book into virtual content. So each piece of content is a short form video that can be distributed on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, the whole 9 yards. And all these virtual versions of you, essentially as an author, are out there collecting leads for your pre-order, for your launch, and for all of your complementary products and services attached to your book, like coaching, consulting, speaking. It's normally where the ROI comes from, but if you can build an audience in anticipation of the launch and get them to buy in, they're much more likely to take action when you finally go for that ask. Gary V's jab, 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 right hook philosophy. And a lot of these videos that we film are about the process. You want to involve people in the process, helping decide on your cover, helping decide on your title and subtitle, the colors of your book, sharing a big win every time somebody writes an advanced blurb or piece of praise for your book, right? We're cultivating that awareness of the book 6 months in advance of it actually coming out. Ideally is when we start that process. And then number 3, Book Thinker still does a lot of book reviews. So our audience has grown to about 1 million impressions a month. We have 150,000 followers. And so Book Thinkers will post 1 or 2 review posts within 1 or 2 weeks of your launch to generate additional pre-orders, and then another post or 2 around your launch. And that's going to generate, at this point, about 100,000 additional impressions for that person's target in our community. And we do network with a lot of other online book communities and stuff. So those are some of the strategies that I've used that Book Thinkers supports me with. And then this week, I'm also launching a home library giveaway. So each person that pre-orders a copy of the book and then submits proof of purchase on our website, we have a little form built out for it. They get an entry into a home library giveaway where we're giving away 500 physical business books, including signed books from some of the coolest people out there, bookshelves, a desk, like the whole 9 yards. And so that's an incentive. For me, I already have these books. I already have a lot of the materials, so it's not a very expensive giveaway for me. But the purchase of 1 book could lead to 500 in a full home library. How cool is that? So layering in different pre-order incentives. And the last one that I'll throw out there, Kevin, books in lieu of services. So Book Thinkers does paid book reviews. I meet with 10, 15 authors a week to tell them about our services. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, if you order 30 copies of my book, paper copies, $15 a piece, it's about a $500 purchase. I'll discount any one of our services by $500.
Oh, cool.
So you're spending the same amount of money, but you're also getting 30 copies of my book. Revenue is the same over here. Payment's the same over there. 30 books got moved. And so books in lieu of services, can people buy your books in exchange for speaking, workshops, mastermind tickets, their monthly payment on your subscription? You can get really creative with this. And we try to coach our author clients into finding some, some type of similar exchange. So I named 5 of the strategies. I mean, we've got some other stuff going on, but I think those are kind of the core strategies that I'm using.
Yeah. No, that's way cool. I mean, 140 podcasts. That's insane. That's awesome.
It is. Yeah. And you got to be super prepared. You got to start those months and months in advance. Here we are talking about 2 months before my book actually comes out.
Yeah.
And every single one of those little things matters.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And by the way, I'll just mention too, like going through the podcast experience over and over and over again is really challenging, but you get really good at presenting your message. I don't know. I don't want to say how many I'm in so far, but like I've gotten a lot better at presenting my message, I think, over the last couple of few dozen podcasts. And that repetition translates into every other area of your life and your business. You want to be really good at communicating your book, because sometimes I'll jump on a sales call with an author and I'd say, "Hey, Kevin, tell me a little bit about why you wrote the book." And they're like, "Well, I guess I started when." It's like, come on, you got to have that answer. Let's go. And the repetition helps you get there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I totally get that. So, and I just want to say writing a book is no small feat. So congratulations for writing it. I'm super stoked to read it. This is one that I'm going to read as soon as it comes out. I want to ask 2 final questions. The second to last question is, if you had, let's say there was a freak accident and every single one of the copies of your book, digital, paper, hardback, whatever, was destroyed, and there was only one book left, and the entire book, except for one concept, was destroyed. So you could only keep one concept from your book, one idea, one principle. Everything else was destroyed. What would that be and why?
Oof, I wish I prepared for this one. Give me like 5 seconds to think about it.
Take your time.
I think my first gut reaction was the Bible, but we'll skip that one for now. We'll say that in the world of Stoicism, so we'll pick a book that talks about it, The Daily Stoic, the idea of memento mori, that we're all going to die. Life is finite. That message has been so incredibly important to me, because I think in today's world, there are a lot of distractions. There are a lot of things trying to grab our attention. And so we fail to take action and we just look to be entertained. And that leads to a pretty disappointing, unfulfilled life. And the top 5 regrets of the dying too, by Bronnie Ware. I'm totally butchering the answer to your question, but I'll run with it. She's a palliative care nurse. She spent the last couple of months with people, or last couple of weeks, talking with them. And she found that a lot of people lived with a lot of regret. And they only realized that they had that regret at the end of their lives, and they wish they could have done more. And the number one regret was that people lived lives based on the expectations of others instead of themselves, society's expectations. And society's expectation is for you to sit back, stare at your phone all day, scroll on social media, watch Netflix, maybe get in a fight on social media or something, and don't be too much of a bother. Don't do too much. And the concept of memento mori reminds me to take action. Life is finite. I'm not always going to have tomorrow, so I need to take action today. Prioritize my time, make the most out of it, because, that whole line about like the pain of discipline weighs a lot less than the pain of regret. So take action, be disciplined, be the best version of yourself. And that concept of memento mori, that we're all going to die, it's just every day it reminds me of that kind of thing that I want to grab onto, which is life and enjoying the passage of time.
That's powerful. No, that's awesome. I think you answered it perfectly. And I know you've already been on the podcast. You've answered this before, but it's a staple. So what does the fight against mediocrity mean to you?
Dude, you know, like 10 minutes ago, I was thinking, I know he's going to ask that question, and I don't remember what I said last time, but can you ask it one more time?
What does the fight against mediocrity mean to you?
To me, it means living up to your potential and avoiding regret. So a similar answer to what I just gave, as far as we're all going to die, take advantage of life, enjoy the passage of time. Mediocrity is sitting back, scrolling social media all day, living under your potential, doing nothing, not improving the lives of your spouse, your children, your parents, the people in your community, and just you'll wash away in the sands of time, never having positively impacted anybody. I mean, that is mediocrity, and I want to fight against it. And, you know, when I say enjoying the passage of time, which I think is my purpose, it's what I optimize for now. I just want to enjoy the passage of time. That's not complacency. Like, progress creates a lot of joy for me. So I am fighting against mediocrity and making progress, and that creates joy in the present moment. And I think that's a really important just reminder for everybody that you can enjoy your life. Like, the result of all these personal development books, building businesses, leading communities, it's to get to a place where you actually like your life. And so I'm happy and I like my life, and the present moment is better than anything in my past or anything in my future. So I'm just going to take advantage of that. And I love it.
Yeah. Amen, dude. Amen. And, you know, at some point during our episode, and thank you so much for being here. At some point, I thought your book, the mediocre reader reads and forgets. The excellent reader reads to implement and change. So your book is really fighting against the mediocrity of the average reader, what we've all experienced. So congrats, dude. Super stoked for you. How do the listeners get your book? What's the best way to do it?
You can go on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever and just type in Rise of the Reader. It's available right now for pre-order, paperback, hard copy, Kindle. And then on the launch day, I believe, is when the Audible becomes available. I'm reading it. So if you aren't completely turned off by my voice, you could check that out too. And the other thing that I'll say to your audience, Kevin, is that one of my favorite things to do is to play book matchmaker. I love to provide book recommendations to people. So if anybody wants to communicate with me and get a personalized book recommendation, just go to Instagram, search Book Thinkers, and shoot me a DM and tell me about a problem you're facing, a skill that you want to improve, and I'll make a book recommendation. And I'll even follow up with you in a few months, hold you accountable, be that accountability partner, a little spreadsheet where I manage this. And I'll say, hey, did you read this? What'd you think? Did you take action? What was your intention? That kind of thing. So yeah, those are the places to go and the ways to touch base.
Very cool. That's awesome. We'll also have a link down below on this episode where they can click and order it as well. Thanks so much for being on the podcast, Nick. You're a stud.
Yeah, man. You're a stud.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a